What makes it so hard to find someone to marry these days? Why does it seem like people are running into so many more complications today than they ever did? Today, we'll be talking about the role of mental health in that on Solving Jewish Singleness with a therapist that gets it, Liz Wallenstein. So why does it seem so hard to get married today? What is it about today, that there's so many complications than there were before? So I'm break that question down into three parts that I see relevant today. And today we're going to talk about part one, which is the role of mental health. Because basically we're at our best, we make our best decisions and choices when we're feeling pretty good about ourselves and pretty much at peace. Unfortunately, in today's times, we're going through a mental health crisis. So there are very high rates of anxiety and depression out there. And overall, there's more people feeling bad than good. That's what, is making it this mental health crisis. So I want to look at that more closely and see how is that affecting people pairing off and getting married. So first of all, I think depression and anxiety have kind of become these overused buzzwords today. So I want to get into what I mean when I use those terms, for this purpose at least. So depression is actually the extreme end of the continuum, but there's plenty of things that are related that are earlier up on the continuum and probably affect more people. So, just kind of being down, apathetic, numb, disinterested, unmotivated. Those all would kind of fall under the depression family, but not as severe as depression. So a single person who's chronically kind of experiencing those kind of emotions, they could be thinking to themselves subconsciously, how can I give when I don't feel full? Like when I feel in such need, when I'm constantly thinking about how to make myself feel better, how could I think about giving myself to another or worrying about another person or tuning into what their needs are? Or, if I have trouble feeling joy in day-to-day life, if I'm not excited about life or happy with who I am or where I am, then why would I want to make life harder for myself by then taking on somebody else and, potentially kids and things like that? Like, it just feels like it's going to make my life harder and it's going to make it harder for me to feel good. So these are the ways that depressive feelings could impact the single person. Now, anxiety also represents kind of the end of the continuum. But, just feeling like harried, preoccupied, just lack of peace, unrest, unsettled, kind of obsessive, those are all under the anxiety umbrella, but less severe forms and probably more common than full-blown anxiety. But for the single who has these symptoms often, they might feel like if life feels like a burden, if life feels tedious or like a task, if life just feels hard, then who has the energy or the desire to make it about others? Like, my needs feel too great to put them to the side and then start caring about somebody else. Now, for the depressed or anxious single with these kind of feelings or beliefs, usually they're subconscious, or even for the person who's aware of them, they kind of push forward anyway, thinking that it's not going to affect them. It's not going to make a difference, that if they want to get married, then they're just going to get married anyway. But what happens is that somebody with potential could come up, and nobody's perfect, nobody's going to win you over. And another dynamic of this is that when you are not in the best place mental health wise, especially depression, but also anxiety. Um, Sometimes you need extremes in order to feel. So if you're kind of numb or just kind of out of it, then you're looking to feel really happy. You're looking to feel really alive in order to choose someone. And in stable, healthy relationships, it's usually a slow grow. It's usually gradual. It's usually just kind of this contentment. It's not extremes. So a lot of people that you could potentially connect with and have a future with may not really register for you. But also what happens is you could see yourself as somebody who's open and available and looking, but these subconscious beliefs keep you from just choosing somebody and saying, okay, I like this person enough, let's go for it, let's do it. Because really you're believing that. Another kind of mental health dynamic that I would say is kind of related but not the same thing is I see single people that mistake their circumstances as their problem and not like an anxious or depressive mentality. And so they end up like paying attention to and treating the wrong thing. And so it leaves them kind of stuck. So, marriage should bring you some happiness and some ease and some relief, but it doesn't make an unhappy person happy. I've seen people who, struggled and complained as a single person, and then they do it as a married person. And it might be about marriage, or it might be something totally different, but who you are is who you're gonna be, whether you're single or married. But I'll give you an example with myself that I think kind of illustrates the whole thing well. And that's, I remember being in therapy at a point when I was single, and I was kind of all worked up and really upset about things. And I'd come into my sessions and talk about the latest thing that was happening with some guy or in my life or, whatever, thinking that that's the thing that was bothering me. And then I remember the therapist once saying to me, what if the way you're feeling isn't because of these incidents or these things that you're bringing in? What if it's just because you're constantly thinking, your brain is just doesn't give you a break? She was referring to rumination, which was a problem for me, and rumination is something that comes along with an anxious mentality. And that was really eye-opening for me, because she was right. I did have a brain, it's still something I have to work at, but I did have a brain that just wouldn't quit and was constantly analyzing things. And to think that that was actually my problem, as opposed to the little individual things that were happening as part of my single and dating life weren't the problem, was a very different way of looking at it. And I know she was right, because once I started to make that the focus, my rumination, my anxious tendency to kind of overanalyze and overthink, things felt a lot better for me. I found a lot of relief. And if I took it off of the singleness, it would just show up in other areas, which was also proof that, it was my thinking that was a problem, and not necessarily, all these kind of little incidents that were happening. Now, the reason why that was such a valuable insight in my journey was because if I had kept making my work about, these getting myself out there more, or making better decisions, or becoming, attracted to different people. If I had treated it like my singleness was the issue, I would have remained stuck. Whereas by treating the constant thinking and that anxious tendency as an issue, I was actually healing and becoming more at peace, more open, more available. And I think that made a difference, that when the right person came along, I was more at peace, present, and available for it, because I was less anxious. So that's what I mean by, not misdiagnosing, not, working on an anxious or depressive mentality, instead of just shrugging those things off and saying, oh, well, this is because I need to, move someplace and have better exposure to different people, or I need to date differently. If you focus on the singleness of it too much, as opposed to your own mood and mental health, it'll keep you stuck. you won't be able to move forward and progress in that way. So what's your work as a single person then? I think that a lot of cases, the best thing that you can do to make yourself more marriageable is to work on any anxiety or depressive tendencies that you have. So whether that's through things that kind of, they're kind of popular today for these reasons, but that things that bring you peace and get you out of your head, like mindfulness or meditation, yoga, exercise, there's a variety of things that can just kind of help calm you, ground you, get you out of your head. Those are all good. And of course, I believe that therapy can also help, that taking a look at where these tendencies come from for you, what contributes to them, what are your beliefs, what are your perceptions, your attitudes that make you that way, what are healthier ones to replace that with. All of those, kind of things that happen with therapy can also obviously relieve some anxiety and depression, and in that way make you more present and available for a relationship to come along and for you to be able to connect with that person. Now, also under this topic of mental health, but now veering off a little bit differently, is not just a mental health crisis, but like a self-esteem crisis. I would say that there's a war on self-esteem out there, because it used to be that people kind of, fumbled their way through life, figured it out, figured out who they were, and then, figuring out and making those decisions and trial and error gave a person a sense of accomplishment, and it created a sense of self-esteem for them. But things aren't like that anymore. Things have changed a lot. There's more a culture there of right and wrong, good and bad, favorable and unfavorable, that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, that there's an answer out there and the answer is outside of you and you have to seek it out. This kind of focus on perfectionism, like the best possible way, is a big part of our culture today, which has kind of replaced that like spontaneous, natural fumbling through that gave somebody a sense of accomplishment before. So instead, we're seeing a lot of insecurity because people are so aware of that there's a way to be more or better or right, and do they have that way? How do they get that way? Also, social media, lots of studies showing how that contributes to insecurity, because it kind of blurs the lines between reality and fantasy, and a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to these kind of fantasy lives that we're taking in as real from somebody else. There's so many options today that there are much more than there were before, that we have kind of decision fatigue. Again, this idea of the best possible thing, and I got to figure out what that thing is instead of just kind of making a choice and that being enough. There's a culture of experts out there, like, there's an expert for everything, and you have to find that expert way of doing things. And then the constant stream of advertising reminding us of ways that we could be more or better. So all of these things create great amounts of insecurity for people. And then what happens when you're insecure is it makes you want to avoid challenge. And guess what? Getting into a relationship, being married, having a family, moving on to the next stages of life, that presents a lot of challenge. So when you're dealing with a lot of insecurity, it's kind of like, well, why would I want to take any challenge on? Like, life feels hard enough, or I don't feel sure of myself enough or confident in myself enough to do that. So we play it safe by avoiding challenges, even if that's happening on the subconscious level. So what can you do about that? The first thing is to try to change your perception from life as a burden, life as hard, to life as an adventure. Like, try to go back to that mentality I described before of there being a joy in figuring things out, in doing your own trial and error, and not treating it as if there's this absolute answer outside of you and that's what you have to get to. Kind of just enjoying the ride, and let that give you a sense of accomplishment based on what you learn and how you develop through that adventure. You also want to be really careful in choosing your influences. So whether that means kind of a media diet, being very selective about how often you look at social media, what you're looking at in social media, and then just regular, television shows and just things that you expose yourself to, like how they land in you, how they influence you, how they shape you. But also really important is not just, the exposure to these things, but exposure to people and environments. Remember that there's no exception to the rule. There's hardly ever an exception to the rule. So, if there's people that you're hanging out with and they're not the people that you think bring out the best in you, then it may not be worth it. And a lot of times I see people do it because like, oh, what are they supposed to do anyway? That's just what's around, or they're just being open-minded. Not everybody has to be like them, but you will be influenced by the people that are around you. So you really have to think about what do you want to be like, and who can you be that with, and what environments bring out the best in you. And something that I think can be a trap in singleness is don't confuse attention for appreciation. Like, make a distinction between those two things. Like, sometimes just having attention feels good, and so we stick in environments or around people just for the attention of it. But instead, think of appreciation. Think of people who can really see you for who you are, for what you have to offer, and really appreciate you for that. And that's what you want to pursue, even if it means less people in your life. And also think about memberships. So, with Corona, I know that going places is difficult, but if there's classes, that about things that you respect, those are great places to go regularly, or to volunteer in a group that you really feel is in line with your values, or to volunteer for a mentor. Like, again, being parts of groups that you can consistently go to, that you feel aligns with like your best self, that brings out the admirable aspects of you. You want to have that consistently in your life. So I hope that helps, and good mental health and good luck. If you thought this recording was helpful, please share it on social media so that it gets to more people that it can help. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. If you're interested in therapy sessions with me online, please contact me through my website or my email or social media. Feel free to send me questions and suggestions of what you'd like to hear me talk about through social media or my website, lizwallensteintherapy.com. Best of luck to you on your journey. I hope to hear good news soon.